All right, good afternoon, everybody. So today we're going to cover a quick PowerPoint. Hopefully it wouldn't be too painful for you. And then Bob's going to give you a live demo of the actual solution. Then we're going to come back, wrap it up, and have a little Q&A at the end of it. So a big deal today is paper, right? And everything that goes with it. I've been doing this for 20 years now. DocuWare's been doing it for 31, 32 years now. And even something as simple as just going to grab a document and bringing it back is on average about 5 minutes. Now that you could be longer or a little shorter. In DocuWare, it's 10 seconds. So imagine all your employees doing 10 searches in a day, right? That's a lot of time. So we want to automatically process all of those incoming invoices and shorten that time. So the first part is starting with capture. And today, primarily people get it through email or through snail mail, right? That invoice is going to come in one of the two ways. Some people still maybe get faxes, while others can even take a picture with their phone and get them into DocuWare. Regardless, we can monitor email addresses, fax machines, FTP sites, all of your networked copier devices, and make sure we get that into DocuWare so that we can start recognizing the data and storing the information. So on storage, it's secure storage, right? You can access it from anywhere. DocuWare even has a mobile app where you can do mobile scanning, find your documents, do your approvals on your invoices or any other document from wherever you are, as long as you have connectivity in some way, shape, or form. But we also adhere to strict guidelines and global plans, right? So even GDPR. The big moneymaker is in the workflow. And unfortunately, most invoices on just touch time, it doesn't seem like it takes a lot. It's about 14 minutes normally, somewhere around there. But it might take you a full net 30 to get the invoice processed, right? So even though somebody's touching it so little, it's taking 14 minutes. I had a customer that had 9,000 of those a month coming in through email, and we took 14 minutes down to roughly 90 seconds of actual touch time. So imagine the savings. We'll just cut it to 12 minutes times 9,000. It's a lot of time that we can take out of a process. So a lot of people will say, well, that's kind of a complicated issue for us. But at DocuWare, last year alone, we added on 1,700 new clients. Out of that, 67% started in, guess what? Accounting and invoices, because it's just a low-hanging fruit. So we can take that, what seems to be a complex process, and because we've seen it so many times and have whittled that down to some predefined best business practices, we can capture the document pretty much automatically, validate and route that document. That's including naming it. Some even with some shortcut approvals that Bob's going to show you later in the demo. Do the invoice approval, comments, that kind of stuff, process that guy all the way to the end, and then allow allow the data at the end to be posted even to your ERP system. And it's really that simple. It doesn't take a lot to digitize what you already do in a more complex nature, but you should be able to grow your business 20 to 30% without having to hire anybody. So let's look at what covers manual paper processing, right? Starting with everybody's favorite, manual data entry. I do it as a hobby, but typically you'll have a piece of paper where you're going to store it either in a paper filing cabinet, window structure. You're still naming that document. And then you're going to turn around and name that document again in your ERP system. So it's a lot of wasted time. Then you have complex coordination with just workflows. Like, I'm sure nobody's ever taken a document, thrown it in their back seat, going to lunch, right, expecting to sign it, hit the brakes too hard, and it slides underneath your seat. It's never happened ever. So it's a lot of time just taking those documents and taking them down the hall for somebody else to sign. And then, of course, security gaps, auditing, and then just strictly document loss. You know, nobody likes to admit it, but people lose documents a lot today in paper processing. So we start with solving those issues with DocuWare, right? Automatic intelligent indexing. Bob's going to show you this later. Is a learning process for DocuWare. It literally reads the document for you, pulls the data off, and we start processing that document immediately. Then with workflow, we can make a process that, again, takes maybe 14 minutes of time total and whittle that down to maybe under 2, right? So, and that's probably on the long side, under 2. But by simply automating that routing process. And then, of course, because we are a global company operating in over 70 countries worldwide, we adhere to all the different compliances out there. And one of my favorite is just making auditing so much easier, because now it can take you 5 minutes to set up an audit report, have that put out for the auditor with no pain to you at all. So the realistic business practice, right? Most companies have experienced software installs that take months and months, sometimes even years, to roll out. It's painful. Nobody likes it. Causes a lot of business disruption. With those 1,700 customers from last year and approaching 19,000 worldwide now, getting up and running in days isn't hard, because we're built in Microsoft Azure Cloud. The highest level they have. It's extremely thin and clean. Again, all you have to have is 4G, 5G cell phone service, and you're off and running. But because we have so many installs out there that really start in accounting, we have completely pre-configured workflows just waiting to be started. So the install time is cut in half dramatically. Very fast, very simple implementation. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Bob, who's going to run you through the whole gamut. Bob, take it away.
Thank you, Justin. Just give me a second to drag my screen into place. Here we go. Okay. So, thank you, as I said, Justin. Hello, everybody. My name is Bob Mutarelli. I'm a solution architect here with DocuWare. I'd like to take the next couple of minutes to show you or give you a couple of examples to illustrate the things that Justin described to you. So for those of you who are new to DocuWare, I'll spend a couple of minutes just talking about the user interface. This is how users get to DocuWare. This is how users interact with documents. The interface is completely browser-based, and what we're looking at now is the user interface and the way it's split between the left and the right side. The right side obviously being the rendering or the display of the document that was, in this case, about to be stored. On the left side, we have what's called a document tray. Now, think of the document tray, if you're not familiar with it already, as the inbox on your desk, right? Somebody comes along and drops a stack of papers, maybe they're invoices, in your inbox, and you would look at them, interrogate them, determine what you're going to do with them. More often than not, that involves storing it somewhere in a file cabinet and using some type of index value to store it someplace that you'll be able to retrieve it again very quickly and easily. And that's what this process entails. These documents, Justin had mentioned some of the various ways we could get documents into DocuWare. These documents were brought in, could have been from email, it could have been from a monitored folder that was loaded with documents from a multifunction device, a scanner of some sort, a desktop scanner. They could have been sent in from someone's phone. Just a little while ago when I had lunch, I scanned my receipt and uploaded it into my DocuWare expense system right from the counter. So there's, I think, at last count, 11 or 12 different ways we can get documents into DocuWare. But we're going to pick up from the documents already being here in the tray. Some of the other tabs we see, things like searches. Now this happens to be when you go to find a document, how would you look for it? In this case, there are several different search dialogues exposed. These are all part of the pre-configured invoice processing solution. And it's just a matter of clicking the search button by either entering some or no search filters to bring back a list of documents. In this case, there's only 2, but they both happen to be for the company US Steel. One of them is a packing slip or a delivery note, and the other is a purchase order. The next tab represents lists. I think of lists as kind of like a dashboard. They show static information. This happens to be the U.S. Steel purchase order, which still shows a remaining purchase order amount. Now, because that amount is greater than 0, it's showing in this dashboard, in this open PO dashboard, showing that we do have an open purchase order for this vendor. Then there's the tasks tab. These tasks are generated by the workflows that Justin mentioned earlier. One of the workflow processes would be for approvals. So the approvals would show up as a task on your interface. And then again, whether you're on the golf course or you know, sitting at home, you can use your mobile device to log into DocuWare and take care of your approvals and answer the tasks that have been assigned to you. So let's go ahead and see some of this in action. The first, let me close that. The first document I'm going to look at is the U.S. Steel document. Now, U.S. Steel is an invoice that we just got in. We recognize the fact that we had that open purchase order in our dashboard. So we have an open purchase order for this company already. So when I go through the store dialog, when I go through the process of actually moving this document from my inbox or my tray into the electronic file cabinet, I use this store dialog to identify the index values that I want to associate with this document. Now, I've run this demo twice already today. So the intelligent indexing that Justin mentioned earlier is already familiar with this document. It already knows where to find the purchase order number, where to find the total amount. Now you'll notice when I entered my cursor into here, a yellow box came up around the total amount. That's how it identifies where the data is on the form, and it remembers this and it learns as it goes, so that the next time we see this document, it will, as you see here, pre-fill all of the index information. So I'll go ahead and introduce this document now to the workflows by storing it. The document now has entered the workflow process. So if I pay attention to my tasks, what's going to happen is, because there is a purchase order and a packing slip for this particular vendor already in place, I suspect that the validation process will recognize this as what we call a three-way match and send it directly to the book and pay process and the completion step. Now, again, right here it says that this was a three-way match. So it recognized that the U.S. Steel invoice for the amount of money had a matching packing slip and a matching purchase order, so it moved it straight through. There was no reason to approve this invoice. The only thing we need to do now is GL code it. So I'm going to take a couple of seconds to go through the GL coding process. This, let's say the first row is taxes. There we go. I'll assign it to the General Administration Cost Center. If I move this slide bar over, it gives me a little more real estate to work with. The amount for the taxes, all I have to do is click on the document to use what's called one-click indexing to populate this field. The second one is going to be for freight and delivery. We'll continue with the same cost center. And the value I want to put in here is the freight and handling value. And lastly, the third row is for supplies and materials. The math is already done for me. It shows the amount, the total amount, or the gross amount of the invoice. So I can go ahead and store this document. But first, I'm going to change the billing date. I'm going to give it today's date. The reason why I want to do that is because once these records have been sent for processing or considered to be posted, we will put them into an export file, and we will bundle those export records based on what's called the accounting period. Right? So those of you in finance familiar with the accounting period, what we'll do is keep those records together so that when that file is exported to our ERP system, they'll all stay together. So by putting the bill date of today, the default accounting period is the bill dates year and month. So 2019-5. So they should all be in that one booking record. So I'll go ahead and confirm that. And now that record, that invoice has completed processing by using a three-way match. And that was just one of the examples Justin mentioned earlier, having to do with shortcuts about processing invoices. The next shortcut I'll demonstrate is the quick match. Now, quick match is related to the vendor record. So it has nothing to do with purchase orders or invoices or packing slips like the three-way match. But what the quick match does is it's identified on the vendor record when we want to send invoices directly to the completion process without approvals, as long as it's for this vendor and it's under a specific amount. Now, the WB Mason quick match limit happens to be set to $1,000. So any invoice that comes in for WB Mason that's under $1,000 will go directly to the completion process. So I'll go ahead and process this document and would expect it to do just about the same thing as the US Steel three-way match. It should go directly to the completion process. Now, that's not to say that it's not going through a certain level of validation. The validation workflow is what's identifying it as a quick match and moving it straight through rather than subjecting it to an approval process. So here's the WB Mason. Again, the validation status reads quick match, pre-approved vendor under the limit of $1,000. So again, it's just taking a minute to go ahead and GL code it, because everything needs to be GL coded. Again, just one click index for the tax. The second line is going to be supplies. And the math is already done for me. I can just change the bill date to today just so it appears in the same booking record or accounting period file. And now that task is completed. So you can see the shortcuts, as Justin put it, certainly do deserve their name. The three-way match and the quick match make it very simple and almost seamless to process an invoice. The last one I'm going to process is not going to be as quick and easy because not everything in the real world is a three-way match or a quick match. So this happens to be an invoice that I am going to process for, in this case, it's the phone company, it's cell phones, I guess. And I want to split this across two different cost centers. So when I store this document, the validation workflow is going to check to see, first of all, it's going to check to see if it's a valid vendor. And one of the big things that we've learned is that in the industry, vendor fraud is a real problem. People who submit seemingly simple or quick and easy invoices to large organizations, hoping they'll just get paid without really being checked. So we always check to make sure the vendor is in our vendor master record file, or else we initiate what's called a vendor onboarding process, where we actually identify it as a vendor that we don't have and we request information before we'll proceed. But this particular vendor is in our system, but it's not a three-way match and it's not a quick match. So it comes into the check details area where an invoice validator, in this case our friend Peggy Jenkins, can see that there is not a three-way match for this. So the three-way match has failed. So what are her options at this point? She can either, she should review the document to make sure that the indexing is correct. Maybe the intelligent indexing needs to be retrained. Maybe the vendor changed their invoice and we need to get a value from a different place. But she can look at the invoice. If she determines something needs to be corrected, these read-only fields can be activated by using the correct and recheck decision. where she can then edit this. And when she clicks confirm, it would loop around and come back into the validation process again with the updated values. She can request a new invoice from the vendor, she can reject the invoice, or she could simply end the process if she determines that the document is in error and does not need to be processed. But at this point, we're going to say that everything's okay and go ahead and proceed to the assignment step of the validation workflow. So we give it a couple of seconds to move through that. So now the same person, the invoice, or the role of the invoice validator, in this case it happens to be the same person, now has to assign the cost center. But she's also has the ability to assign it to a requester. So if I were not using cost center assignments, if this was an invoice that was going to be approved by one person, I could assign it to the requester of the goods and services and send it directly to them. Or I could request a new invoice, or I could still reject the invoice. So there's always those options. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to proceed with the assignment. This is a telephone invoice. We'll go with cost center general administration. And let's say that general administration is only responsible for $400 of this invoice. This one is also telephone. This one will go to management. They'll get the remainder, $457, and I just simply have to assign it to the cost center manager responsible for the management cost center. And confirm. So now the validation is complete and the assignment is done. We've assigned this invoice to two different people in order to approve: the cost center manager for general administration and the cost center manager for management. And here are the two tasks. Now I'm seeing all tasks now because I am logged in as an administrator. So I see everything. So rather than logging off and logging on 3 or 4 times to demonstrate the point, I'll show you that this task for general administration is assigned to Elizabeth Cash. So she would only see one task if she were logged in right now. So her task at this point is to accept or reject. We've identified the cost center as general administration, that's hers, and the sum is $400, and that's the amount that her cost center would be responsible for. So she has the option now of either accepting or rejecting this. So we'll accept it, confirm it, and the management cost center is assigned to Peter King, and when he logged in, he would see this task that identified as the management cost center had that remainder amount of $457 for his approval. So he can go ahead and confirm that. So this is a way for us to automate the process of distributing invoices to the people required to approve them or responsible for approving them. And if for some reason the invoice exceeded the threshold or the approval limit for a particular approver, then the invoice would automatically, via the workflow, get routed to that person's manager for a next level or second level approval. But in this case, everything fit into the thresholds. We then move to the same completion step that the other 2 invoices went through. It's already been GL coded, so we don't have to do anything there. I will change the bill date though, because I do want it to appear in the same accounting period, and confirm. And that's it. I've processed those 3 invoices. If I look at the booking records, I see the one booking record is here. When I open it up, I see the itemized entries for the invoices that I just processed. If I were to download this particular document, I'll open it rather than save it. But this CSV can now be imported by an ERP system in order to get these individual records stored in the ERP system. And we have a document link where if the ERP supports it, we can utilize that link to come back to DocuWare and fetch the actual invoice that caused the record to be created. Or we could utilize something called DocuWare Smart Connect, which is an integration point that would allow us to lay a button, an overlay on any ERP system, and use that button to extract information from the screen in order to go and find the invoice that generated the transaction. So I hope that wasn't too fast. Justin, that's everything I had planned on showing today, so I'll switch it back over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Bob. All right. So a good thing with what Bob's showing, and I don't know if this was picked up or not, but so much of what DocuWare does is a self-learning product, right? If it sees an invoice once, it's going to start learning that invoice. If it sees that you're processing it a certain way, it's going to learn those processes. So it's a very nice way to take shortcuts, if you will, on naming your documents. So as this slide showing, we're going to extract all those details to make everything easier, from geocoding, cost centering, removing all those manual touches that take so much time, right? And the shortcuts, which I love, the quick matches and the three-way matches, really do save so much time. I mean, a three-way match can take 5-6 minutes at times, right? And that just reduces it down to automatic. It's great. So then we can route your invoices, of course, based off of workflow and your processes, automate vendor onboarding. The limits are just crazy high here, right? Eliminating a lot of the searching, integrating directly into the products you have to allow your end users to stay in the products they know, and also maintain compliances and audit trails, right? Taking an audit, and I'm sure if anybody's gone through that lovely experience lately and how much time you spent on it, doing an audit in 5 minutes and handing the auditor a nice little USB key with a little mini version of DocuWare on there would be a great thing to do. So in essence, what we really are talking about is really saving a lot of time and a lot of money. On a conservative end, guys, we should be able to grow your business 20 to 30% without having to hire extra headcount to do that processing. And that's a great feat today. But really don't take our word for it. We have thousands of clients out there. Julie Priest from Comfort Systems, basically covered the same thing Bob and I just covered, from decreasing the time it takes to process all the invoices to increasing their productivity, right? We have several. I know we just mentioned a grocery chain, but several throughout the country. So this is happening every day. It's repetitive and it's very fast. So with that said, I am going to turn it over to Nicole so that we can do questions and answers and get you guys on your way.